Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second live of our Dental Photography School podcast launch event. I'll wait for a minute or two for all of you to give me a confirmation that my voice is loud and clear, and once I get that, I will start off with the session right away. So, quick check. I'll be looking forward to somebody's comment. I can see um, a couple of people have already joined us. If you can hear me, just give me a heads up for me to start. Cool. Loud and clear from Megha. Thank you so much, Megha, for letting me know. And I'm going to be sharing my screen right now because midway, the last time, I had an issue. So I got disconnected in my previous live session. So apologies for that. So what I'm going to be doing is before starting off with the lenses, I'm going to be completing what was left over from my previous session first. I hope that's fine with all of us, and then I will proceed to the lenses. Okay, so let me start off. Hi, Amit Kumar Singh, how are you? I think all good. Okay, so let me start off with the session right away. Okay. Cool. I think you will be able to see my screen better now. So we had stopped over here. This is where I got disconnected when we are discussing the add-on wish list that we would love to have in our camera if we want to do wildlife photography. So the first thing that I'm going to be looking at for wildlife photography is a camera which has a good frames per second. Anything more than 10 frames per second would be super good. And I suggested two cameras out here, that is Canon 90D and Canon 80D. So the 90D is the successor of 80D. And this camera is well known for wildlife photography and also something called as time-lapse videos. So if you want to do a time-lapse, which is a series of pictures, you should seriously consider buying the 80D or the 90D because it's a beast. It's very rugged and you can use it very nicely in safaris and your wildlife tours. Okay, so if you want to do wildlife or time lapse photography, go ahead and get the 90D. And we also saw a couple of cameras that are required for microscope photography. So the primary requirement for attaching your camera to the microscope would be that the camera should be capable of giving you a great result when it comes to ISO. In the sense, even if you are going to or switching over to a high ISO, you should not be getting noise, which is quite possible in the entry level cameras which I had suggested before. So if you want a camera for your microscope, just go ahead and buy a full frame for that because it's going to give you great results even at higher ISO. So the two cameras that I would like to suggest over here is Canon R5 and the very famous Sony Alpha series, the Sony Alpha 7 Mark 3 or Mark 4, whatever you can get your hands on. It's a great camera and it's going to give you lovely results for microscope photography. But again, if you ask me my personal opinion over here, I would probably want to stick to Canon over here again. I'm not doubting the potential of Sony out here, but I would prefer a Canon over here again because just in case of an emergency, if I would want to use a camera for some other purposes, and because I'm going to be having a lot of Canon lenses, because my entry level camera is of Canon, I should be able to use a camera which is going to allow me to use those lenses, and that's going to be possible only with the Canon camera and not with the Sony camera. So for me, if I'm going to buy a microscope and if I want to attach a camera onto it, it's definitely going to be a Canon R5 or a Canon R6, whatever fits my budget at that particular point of time. But I'm not going to be buying Sony because I'm not going to be using Sony Alpha outside the microscope because I don't have any lenses for that, and they are really very, very expensive. And when you speak about high resolution videography, both the cameras are super good. In fact, the Canon R5 is capable of recording videos in 8K as well, a feature that is only available with Canon at this point of time. I'm sure other companies are going to be following suit, but for now, R5 really rocks. And if you want to think of 8K video recordings, I think R5 is a great choice. Why would you want to do 8K recording? Just in case if you want to crop a lot in your videos, 8K is going to give you an edge over the other cameras. But do keep in mind there are news about EOS R5 and EOS R6 overheating. So just keep in mind that the video recording time should be less than 29 minutes or stuff like that. And just give your camera a break before you continue video recording with it even more. So any DSLRs, any which way is going to be recording a video for 29 minutes or 30 minutes maximum. So once that time limit is over, you have to maybe start recording again. And if you want to record, say, for an hour or two, Sony might be a better option as compared to Canon because it is known to overheat. All right, and coming on to the next part is, do you really want to have a flip screen as your add-on wish list? Okay, so very honestly, I bought my entry-level camera which had a flip screen because I was really excited about it at that particular point of time. But honestly, I haven't used a flip screen for more than 1% of the pictures because the autofocusing is really, really bad when you use a flip screen in DSLRs. It's great for mirrorless. So if you're going ahead for a mirrorless and then you're using a flip screen, that's completely fine. So if you're a vlogger and if you're planning to do a lot of videos, I would suggest that you go ahead and buy a full frame camera like a Canon R5 or an R6 and use the flip screen in that particular case. But DSLRs are not particularly great with that flip screen because the autofocus is really bad. But very honestly, flip screen is not of much use. If you want to do a lot of videos like I do, and if you want to use your camera for that, I don't think that flip screen is needed because I usually connect my camera to my laptop, and that's called tethering. That has an added advantage that you understand if you're in focus or not much more accurately, which is not possible with the small LCD screen that's there on your camera. So if you're thinking of doing videos or video blogging or vlogging, I think tethering is a better option than going for a flip screen. So it does not give you an add-on advantage unless you are a vlogger and you do a lot of outdoor videos on site. So in that case, I would probably go for Canon R5 or R6. And I conducted survey because one of my inquiries yesterday was, should we go ahead and go for a touchscreen? Very honestly, I don't use it much because I'm not a bit of a vlogger, or I am not into a lot of wedding photography or street videography, wherein touchscreen is really good for focusing. So in challenging situations when you want to do videos, so you do need that touchscreen which is really fast, which will help you focus and decide the point of focus. But I don't do it a lot. But if you want to do a lot of videos and in challenging environments, in the sense like wedding videography or say street videography or vlogging, in that case a touchscreen might be helpful for autofocusing. But again, in DSLRs, it's not of great value because the autofocusing really sucks as compared to the mirrorless. And I conducted a quick survey yesterday. Do you really use touchscreen of your DSLR? So you can see on Twitter, 100% said nope. And on one of my Instagrams, it says no by 73%. And my other Instagram account said nope by 50%. So most of the people seem to not be using that touchscreen quite a bit. That's because even if you want to do videography, because of Canon R5 and R6, they have great eye tracking. So you don't really need that touchscreen, which is helpful for focusing nowadays. So my suggestion would be chuck the flip screen and chuck the touchscreen. It's not really needed. if you want to do clinical photography and general purpose videography. But if you want to do challenging videography like wedding photography and vlogging, just go ahead with a Canon R5 or an R6 or a Sony Alpha 7, Mark 3 or Mark 4, because they are great at eye tracking. But stuff like touchscreen and flip screen are not going to be adding any value to your basic camera choices for clinical photography and a little bit of general photography. So I hope that must have helped. That was the remaining part of our previous live session when I got disconnected. And now we start off with what is the best lens for clinical photography. All right. So um, I'm super excited about this second live session, and I can see we have quite a few people who have already joined us. Thank you for joining me, and happy Diwali to all of you. And let's start off with the session that is the live 2 right away. All right, so which is the lens that is fit for clinical photography? That must be a question for quite a lot of you out there. um, so the primary requirement for a great lens, if you want to not have distortion in your images or your videos, would be your lens should have a focal length in the range of 85 to 105 if you are in dentistry, because we are focusing a lot of our cases in the head and neck region, which is not a very big region with respect to the body proportion. But if you are into dermatology, you might need a focal length in the range of 35 to 50 So, if you are a dermatologist and if you want to shoot larger parts of the body, or in fact the full body, a good choice would be a 35 lens or a 50 lens, macro lens. But if you are a dentist or an ophthalmologist, a great choice would be a lens having a focal length of 85 to 105. So just keep that in mind. Let me compare something over here. A lot of people in dentistry and dermatology use their phones for documentation, and there's a reason why you should not be using that is because um, typically phones give a lot of distortion in our pictures. So what do I mean by distortion over here is the barrel distortion that I'm talking about and not the noise. So don't confuse yourself. What do you mean by barrel distortion? Is the object in front of the lens that's closest to the lens is going to be looking huge, and the object that's away from the lens is going to be looking comparatively smaller. This uh, physical property gets amplified if you're using a wide angle lens, in the sense focal length which is less than 50 So I would suggest people not to use a focal length of less than 50 for clinical photography, unless you are a dermatologist and if you want to take full body pictures, then you might choose a 35 macro lens in that case. But if you are going to be shooting an area which is as big as your hand or the abdomen or the face, I think at least you should have a 50 focal length in your camera so that you do not suffer from a lot of distortion in your pictures. And especially dentists and ophthalmologists, I suggest that we all stick to a focal length of 85 and 85 to 105 It's great for us, because we don't want the anterior subject to look big and the posterior subject to look really small, because it looks really funny and we do not want to have such pictures obviously in our publications. So why does this distortion happen at the first place? And obviously that's because of something called as focal length. Our mobile phone cameras are notorious when it comes to a focal length. They typically have a focal length of 4.26 or maybe around 5 in that particular range, which is if you compare it with a 35 equivalent, it would be around 30 So that's still quite less, and it is going to give us a lot of distortion. So if you want to avoid having distortion in your pictures, please do not choose focal lengths which are less than 50 if you are a dermatologist, and less than 85 if you are a dentist or an ophthalmologist. So a small tip to keep in mind. Okay, so we've already spoken about the focal length. So what are the other basic requirements that we want to have in our clinical photography lenses? It should be light in weight. Like we discussed in our live one, that's the episode one, we discussed that any kind of photography equipment that we want for clinical photography should be light in weight, because it'll be more comfortable for all of us to use, especially if you're a dentist. We use it with one hand quite frequently. So try choosing a lens without image stabilization, or try choosing a lens without vibration reduction or vibration control, because that add-on gyroscope or a gyroscope, whatever you call it, is going to add a lot of weight in your lens, thereby making it more and more uncomfortable for use for clinical photography. Okay, now I personally believe that whatever lens we choose, it has to be an internally focusing lens. That's the third criteria for me. So what do you mean by an internally focusing lens? So obviously we are going to be choosing a prime lens for dental photography or clinical photography. I'm going to be talking about what is a prime lens and what is a zoom lens in a bit. But you just need to understand what I mean by internally focusing and externally focusing is that when I try to focus my lens with the focusing ring or the focusing barrel, I would not want the lens dimensions, the physical dimensions of the lens to keep on changing. That is because if I'm using a ring flash or a twin flash, which is attached to the front part of my lens, I don't want that flash to keep on moving because I don't want the wire contacts to get loose and reduce the life of my flash. Also, many a times, since I take a lot of courses on dental photography in Mumbai, I have realized that while focusing, a lot of my students don't realize when they are almost about to touch the subject. So it is one reason why I completely um, avoid suggesting an externally focusing lens, which does change dimensions when you try to focus it. So my primary requirement would be my lens should be an internally focusing lens, and it's an absolute must-have for me. The other thing that is really vital for me, that's the fourth aspect, is when I use a lens, I would probably want to go quite close to my subject and shoot. In the sense, my lens should be such that its minimum focusing distance is quite less. In the sense, the lens should allow me to go very close to the subject and take pictures of the subject. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why we use a macro lens for dental photography and documentation. So I'm going to be giving you an example over here. Let's just say the ideal lens for dental photography or ophthalmic photography is a 100 mm macro lens, or say even dermatology photography is a 100 mm macro lens. Now, almost all the companies are going to be making two types of 100 mm lenses. One is a normal 100 mm lens and one is a 100 mm macro lens. So why you should not get stuck between these two, or why you should not get confused between these two, is one of them is a normal 100 mm lens and not a 100 mm macro lens, and our choice has to be a 100 mm macro lens. Why? Because the 100 mm macro lens would allow me to go closer to my subject and shoot. In the sense, the minimum focusing distance of a 100 mm macro lens is smaller than the minimum focusing distance of the normal 100 mm lens. Okay, so do not use a normal 100 mm lens, please buy a 100 mm macro lens, because it will allow you to go closer to your subject. So why do you want to get closer to your subject? Obviously one of the reasons is because since I'm going to be doing a lot of flash photography in my clinical photography, if I'm standing far away from my subject, that flash is not going to be falling exactly on my subject. That flash will get dispersed if I'm standing far from the subject. I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this. But when I move in closer, the light intensity kind of goes to a square. That's the inverse square law, if I'm not wrong. So you need to go close to your subject if you want to use your flash to the absolute fullest, to its full potential. So go ahead and don't think twice, just go ahead for a macro lens because it's going to be allowing you to go close. Alright, I want to give you a practical example over here. Have you ever experienced this before? You are trying to focus on a subject and you're close to it, but it's just not focusing. Maybe you're using your mobile phone or maybe you're using your DSLR. I'm not really bothered about that, but has it ever happened to you that when you're trying to focus on a subject, it just does not focus? And when you just move in a little bit more behind, it gets focused. That is because you did not respect the minimum focusing distance. So what is the minimum focusing distance is? It is the distance that you should keep at least if you want to focus on your subject. So if you go even more closer and do not respect that minimum focusing distance, the lens is not going to be able to focus. All right. So what I'm saying is the normal 100 mm lens is going to be having larger minimum focusing distances, which will allow you to stand farther away and it will not allow you to come close. However, a 100 macro lens is going to be having minimal minimum focusing distance, thereby allowing you to come close to your subject and take absolutely brilliant pictures of your subject, irrespective if it's clinical photography or macro wildlife photography. All right. So the minimum focusing distance has to be at the absolute minimum, and that is why we use a macro lens. Okay. So another reason why I suggest a macro lens is that because only a macro lens has something called as magnification ratios. So why do we want magnification ratios? Is to achieve standardization in the sense, um, how do I get repeatable pictures? I'm going to be getting repeatable pictures only and only if I stand at the same distance during my pre-operative images, during the operative images, and the post-operative pictures as well. How can I achieve it? By maintaining a constant distance. If I want to maintain a constant distance, I have to utilize a feature that's available only and only on a macro lens, and that is called as magnification ratios. I'm going to be elaborating it pretty soon in this live session itself. All right. And the last thing that I probably want to take into consideration is my lens should be such that it should be able to fit on all the cameras of the particular company that I have my camera of. In the sense, if I'm buying a Canon macro lens, it should fit on all the Canon cameras that I would have. Or if I'm buying a Nikon macro lens, it should fit on all the Nikon bodies that I have. So these are the primary requirements. Let me just summarize it quickly for all of you. Number one, if you do not want to have distortion, your focal length should be in the range of 85 to 105 mm. The lens should be light in weight, thereby it should be a non-image stabilization lens. It should be an internally focusing lens in the sense it should not change its physical dimensions when I try to focus on my subject. It should be a macro lens because it should have the property of magnification ratios so that I can standardize my pictures by the way of maintaining a constant distance from my subject. It should have a minimum focusing distance which is very less. That is why again a macro lens, and it should be made of a mount that is capable of fitting on any camera body of my particular choice of my parent camera. In the sense, if I'm using a Canon camera, it should fit on all the Canon cameras. If I'm using a Nikon lens, it should fit on all the Nikon bodies that I particularly have. So once I find a lens that's going to be fitting in all these categories, I'm definitely going ahead and buying it. All right. So let us see which lens is going to be fitting well in the practical tips that I've just given you. So the ideal lens that I would suggest all of you all is the 100 Canon macro lens. Why? Obviously, number one, it is a 100 lens, so it's almost not going to give you any distortion. There'll be no distortion at all. Second, this lens, which is the golden ring lens, is without image stabilization. So yes, it is quite light in weight as compared to the IS version. Number three, it is an internally focusing lens. So if I rotate the focusing barrel, it's not going to change its dimensions. Number four, it is a macro lens, so it has minimum focusing distance, which is very less. Number five, it is a macro lens. That is why it has magnification ratios. And number six, it is going to be fitted, or it is capable of mounting itself on any camera body, any DSLR camera body. So it does not matter if you are using a crop sensor DSLR or if you are using a full frame DSLR. This 100 macro lens, non-AS version from Canon, obviously is going to be fitting on any Canon DSLR. Okay. So I am stressing on the word DSLR over here because this is not a lens for the mirrorless cameras. And this is one of the reasons why I do not suggest buying mirrorless cameras at this point of time, because the mirrorless cameras that Canon has come up with right now, that's the R series or the M series, it does not have a 100 macro lens. I think the maximum macro that is available should be around 35 or 60, which does not qualify for a great macro lens to be used for clinical photography if you do not want to have distortion. So currently Canon has a 100 macro lens which is pure gold when it comes to dental photography, dermatology photography, or even ophthalmic photography. Go ahead and buy this one. This is a great lens. I love this lens, and this is my workhorse. So the Canon 100 macro lens known as version is my choice. So what if you are a Nikon user? So you can go ahead and buy this lens. This is the 105 macro lens by Nikon. Okay. So why I choose the Canon over Nikon is because of the following reasons. Number one, the 105 Nikon macro lens is with VR, means it is with vibration reduction. So naturally, this lens is going to be much more heavier as compared to the Canon 100 non-IS version. Okay, so it makes it all the more difficult for me to use this lens. The second reason is because it is a VR lens, means because it is a lens with image stabilization in it, it is much more expensive, almost double the cost of the Canon 100 macro lens without image stabilization. Like I said in our previous episode, this 105 macro lens by Nikon is around 70,000 rupees Indian. In that 70,000 rupees Indian, I can probably buy the 100 macro lens non-IS of Canon as well as a camera body. So why would I go ahead and buy a Nikon camera or a Nikon lens? Because I can save a lot of money. And even if you buy this VR lens, you have to keep it off for clinical photography, because clinical photography is mostly flash photography, and you get the best results when the VR is switched off or the image stabilization is switched off. Does this lens fit on both the camera bodies, that's crop sensor as well as the full frame? The answer is yes, it does. So that's some great news. And is it internally focusing? Yes, this lens is an internally focusing lens. So a quick roundup on the Nikon 105 macro lens. It is an internally focusing lens. It is a macro lens, so you can go quite close. It has magnification ratios, yes. The problem is it is with VR, so it's quite expensive and very heavy. So I would not suggest it. But if you are a Nikon user, go ahead and buy it. It's a great lens. I've used it. It's really sharp. But I'd still go ahead and think of buying a Canon over here, and that's why a Canon camera body. If you are a Nikon crop sensor body user, this might be a good choice for you, because this is not a great option. And the lens that I'm talking about is the Nikon 85 macro lens. But keep in mind, this lens is only for crop sensor camera bodies. That means if you are using a Nikon crop sensor DSLR, this lens is going to fit on your camera. If you use this on a full frame body, it's going to give you vignetting. We'll speak about vignetting in forthcoming episodes. But just keep in mind, the 85 Nikon macro lens is only for crop sensor bodies. Again, it is a macro lens, so you can go pretty close. It has magnification ratio, so I do have this lens. It's a great lens. It works perfectly fine. It's quite light in weight, but again, it's quite expensive as compared to the Canon 100 macro lens. It is an 85 lens, so it is great for people who want to record a larger field, in the sense if you are an orthodontist or if you do a full mouth rehabilitation case, this lens might be a great choice for you. But if you are an anti-aesthetic dentist like I am, or if I do a lot of quadrant dentistry, I'd probably want to choose a 105 macro lens over this 85 macro lens. But the reason why I suggest this lens is because it's pretty light in weight and much more easier to use. It's more compact, and it does satisfy all the requirements of a macro lens if you're a Nikon user. If you're a Nikon crop sensor body user, let me put it in that way. So this is not a lens for full frame Nikon users. Just keep that in mind. A word of caution over here is, if you find lenses like a 55-250 lens or a 75-300 lens, do not get confused. These are called as zoom lenses. So I told you that I'm going to be speaking about what is a zoom lens and what is a prime lens. So here goes. Any lens which has two focal lengths written on it, that is 55-250, it has the minimum value and the maximum value. These are called zoom lenses, and they can never be macro lenses. So do not use these lenses for clinical photography because of a lot of reasons. One of the most important reasons is you're not going to be getting a lot of standardization, and you'll have to stand very far because its minimum focusing distance is too large. and it does not have magnification ratios as well. Okay, and it's not that great in focusing as well. A lot of reasons why you should not be using a zoom lens, and please do not buy them. So basically, I had suggested a 100 mm macro lens. So when I said that lens, that is obviously a prime lens because it has only one focal length written on it. That's a 100 mm lens. The same holds true for a Nikon 85 mm lens. So 85 mm macro lens is again a prime lens, obviously. Go ahead and use it. But when I say 55 250 lens, I'm talking about two numbers out here. These are called zoom lenses. So whenever I say two numbers, this 55 250, 75 300, 104 100 400, do not buy these lenses for clinical photography because they can never be macro lenses. Although it might be inscribed on them macro dash dash dash, some distance might be written, that does not mean that it is a macro lens. Just keep in mind, you have to specify a lot of times that you want a macro lens for clinical photography. In fact, even when you go ahead and buy a macro lens, just keep an eye for that particular word, a macro. So if you go to an online store and if you see 85 mm lens, so do not buy it until unless you confirm it that it's an 85 mm macro lens. Okay. A quick tick over here would be that a macro lens would have a minimum f number of around 2.8 usually. And in Nikon it might be around 3.5 in the 85 mm macro lens one that I just spoke about. So that would be a valuable tip. If the minimum f number is around 2.0, it might not be a macro lens. But I think Sony makes one. I'm not really sure. I'll double check on it. But just keep in mind that most of the macro lenses have a minimum f number of 2.8 most of the times, and the Nikon 85 mm macro lens has a minimum of 3.5. But if it's f of 2.0, that's a red flag. It might not be a macro lens. So just keep in mind these numbers whenever you plan to buy. The most important thing to keep in mind is look out for the word macro. And if you're not really confident of choosing the lens, don't buy it before cross-checking it with somebody more experienced. All right, but definitely do not go for a zoom lens. It's a bad deal altogether. So I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel, and I want to specify at this particular point of time that there's close to 40 hours of content, 40 to 50 hours of content on my YouTube channel. That's Dental Photography School. Go ahead and check out all the videos because they're going to be really, really helpful for all of you all. Okay, right? So this, I'm going to be coming out with a summary now about what all lenses that are available for clinical photography. Let's talk about Canon first because that was my body of choice in the DSLR. Since I chose Canon body, I have two choices: 100 mm macro lens without image stabilization and 100 mm macro lens with image stabilization. Obviously, the one with image stabilization is very heavy. How do you identify it? Is because it has a red color ring. So the Canon 100 mm macro lens with a red ring in front of it is the IS version. Do not buy it. Go ahead and buy the golden ring lens. It is the non-IS version, and that's the gold standard for clinical photography whenever you're using flash. If you're a Nikon user, you have two macro lenses, a 105 mm macro lens and an 85 mm macro lens. Both of these lenses are VR lenses in the sense both of them are heavy and both of them have vibration reduction. So you can buy any of your choice, but just keep in mind the 105 mm is going to be fitting on the full frame as well as the crop sensor. However, the 85 mm macro lens is only made for the crop sensor body users in Nikon DSLRs. All right. Now the last bit of caution is do not go ahead and buy a third-party lens because of a lot of reasons, and I'm going to be talking about why you should not buy a third-party lens right now. So a lot of companies make lenses which are macro lenses for a Canon body or a Nikon body. Why I do not suggest them is because number one, so I'll give you an example over here. So the Tamron 90 mm macro lens 2.8 f is around 40,000 rupees. Why would I buy this lens? Because the Canon, the original Canon 100 mm macro lens is just 35,000 rupees. Does not make any sense, right? So why the third party lens is more expensive over here is because the third party lens that I just spoke about, the Tamron SP90 mm f2.8, is the VC version, means it is the vibration control version. And we obviously do not want vibration control, vibration reduction, or image stabilization because it's much more expensive and heavy. Most importantly, heavy. That's why I would not suggest this lens. So again, the winner over here is the Canon 100mm. But if you ask me about this lens called Tamron SP AF 90mm 2.8 Di, this is the one which is around 26,000 Indian rupees. So this is the non-IS version that I'm talking about right now. But the problem with this lens is it is a very flimsy lens. I'll tell you what are the problems with this lens. Number one, it is a plastic body. It does not feel that really. It does not feel really good in the hands. Its focusing is not really that good. The reason why it's a put off for me is that it's an externally focusing lens. In the sense, it changes dimensions when I try to focus it. That means my flash is going to go ahead and forwards when I try to focus it. The focusing, if you're on autofocus mode, is really lousy over here. And the most important reason why you should not be using this Tamron 90mm lens without image stabilization is because its lens diameter is lousy. Okay, so one of the primary things that I would probably consider before buying a macro lens is that the lens diameter, that means the outer end of the lens, that is the objective part of the lens, should have a diameter that should be capable of taking a ring flash or a twin flash of my choice. So typically, ring flashes are good with a 52 diameter, 58 diameter, 67 diameter, or a 72 diameter. But none of the ring flash manufacturers that I know of, if you know of, you can tell me, make a 55 adapter. Okay. So now, if you're stuck with a Tamron 90mm non-image stabilization lens, it has a diameter of 55 So if you buy a ring flash or a twin flash in future, it's not going to be fitting on this particular lens. That's a big drawback. So if you want to fit your ring flash or a twin flash, you might have to buy or invest on a separate adapter if you want to use your ring flash or a twin flash. That is a really big put off for me. So please do not buy this lens because it's a flimsy lens. It's very weak. It looks shabby. It's an externally focusing lens. Its focusing is lousy, and most importantly, it has a diameter which does not fit any ring flash or a twin flash. So you might want to adapt. You might want to invest on an adapter, which is a big put off for me. All right. So just keep that in mind. All right. Now I'm going to be comparing the IS and the non-IS version in Canon. So the golden ring one is the non-IS version. It is light in weight and it's economic. The red ring one is the IS version. It is heavy and it is expensive. So it's a no-brainer that you have to invest on the non-IS version. Keep in mind, even if you buy the IS version thinking that it's great, trust me, you have to put the image stabilization off because that's how flash photography is supposed to be done. IS has to be put off when you do flash photography because it gives you an irritating sound when the IS image stabilization is active. All right. If you want to use the non-image stabilization lens outdoors, that means without flash photography, you can. So I do a lot of outdoor photography like macro photography of flowers, insects and stuff like that, even without image stabilization. So with the golden ring 100mm macro non-IS lens, I do a lot of flower photography, insect photography, wildlife macro photography, even without flash. So having IS is not really that great add-on, or it's not going to give you any edge as such per se in clinical photography or maybe even general photography quite a bit. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about how I use magnification ratios to maintain a constant distance from my subject, which is the most important reason why I suggest a macro lens. All right, so just to inform you, I have a super video on my YouTube channel for this. It's called Understanding Magnification Ratios, or how to apply magnification ratios in dental photography or clinical photography. Now, the reason why I think that is very important is because a lot of people who have a macro lens already for their clinical practice do not know how to use the macro lens and they don't know what magnification ratios are. So what is a magnification ratio? Let me tell you that first. So magnification ratio, it is something that is there on your 100 mm macro lens. All right. So typically, so let me take an example of a Canon macro lens over here. Typically, they are the yellow numbers written on the Canon 100 mm macro lens. If you're using some other company, I think even in Nikon it's in yellow color numbers. So you'll have a dial on your lens which has numbers. So you might have yellow numbers, white numbers, green numbers, red numbers. Typically, the macro magnification ratio is either yellow or orange in color. So on the dial, you must be having 1 is to written either inside the dial or 1 is to written outside the dial. And when you rotate the focusing barrel or the focusing ring, the numbers inside the dial, they keep on rotating along with it. So just a note before you try to rotate the magnification ratio ring or the focusing ring, please ensure that your lens is on manual focus and then try to rotate the focusing ring. All right. So suppose I want to use a magnification ratio of 1 is to 1. So how do I set that? I rotate my focusing ring in such a way that I get an alignment 1 is to 1 with a magnification ratio pointer, which is typically white in color, a white line on the outside of the dial. So once I set a magnification ratio of 1 is to 1, I'm not supposed to change, I'm not supposed to rotate the focusing barrel or the focusing ring. So how do I focus on my subject? So the way to focus on my subject now is to go close and then come behind slowly. All right. So that's how we focus using a macro lens. All right. So what are the most important magnification ratios that we use for clinical photography? The most widely used magnification ratios for clinical photography is 1 is to 15 for an area which is almost as big as the face. For an area which is almost as big as a smile, we use 1 is to 3. And for an area which is as big as the mesodistal dimension of 5 teeth or 4 teeth, it would be 1 is to 1.5. Keep in mind, these magnification ratios are for crop sensor camera body users. For full frame camera body users, the magnification ratio for the full face area would be 1 is to 10. For an area close to that of a smile would be 1 is to 2. And for an area which is as big as 4 teeth or 5 teeth mesodistally would be 1 is to 1. All right. So the magnification ratios are different for different camera bodies. That's one thing that you can take away from today's session. And now I'm going to be telling you how to apply these magnification ratios. So just give me a confirmation if you can listen to the video right now. So what does magnification ratio mean? Magnification ratio is a comparison between the size of the subject and the size of its image on the camera. Okay. Are you able to listen to my video's voice? Anyone? I'll just wait for a heads up so that I'm sure that you are able to listen to my video. Could you listen to the video's audio? Anyone who is watching me on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter? Great. So, Vishnu, Gopal, thank you so much for the heads up. Thank you so much for the heads up, Arvind. I would like to know who all are there with me today. So, I'm going to be taking questions later on. But let me go ahead and put the video for all of you all. All right. So what does magnification ratio mean? Magnification ratio is a comparison between the size of the subject and the size of its image on the camera's sensor. When we talk of magnification ratios, the term is usually associated with photographing small subjects. If you are photographing a subject that is 1 centimeter long and the image on the camera sensor is also 1 centimeter, then the magnification ratio is 1 is to 1. In other words, the subject and the image are identical in size. If you are photographing a subject that is 1 centimeter long and the image on the camera sensor is half a centimeter, then the magnification is 1 is to 2. In other words, the image on the sensor is half the size of the original. Similarly, if the subject is 1 centimeter and the image is 1/4 centimeter, the magnification ratio is 1 is to 4, meaning the image on the sensor is 4 times smaller than the original subject. So we saw what is 1 is to 1, 1 is to 2 and 1 is to 4 magnification ratios. But what if the image on the sensor is larger than the subject? Let's take an example. Let us say the subject is 1 centimeter, but the image on the sensor is 2 centimeters. In this case, the magnification is 2 is to 1. In other words, the image on the sensor is twice the size of the original subject. But what is the application of magnification ratio in clinical documentation? Stay tuned for our next video. Please like and share this video if you found it helpful. So I'm going to be showing you the next video right away, and I'm hoping that you understood what the video had to tell us. Let me put the second video so you understand how we actually apply it in clinical photography. All right. Coming straight to the point, the reason why we use magnification ratio is to achieve standardization in dentistry. That is to achieve the same composition in each and every image, meaning we should be able to see the same teeth and the same size of every tooth in each and every image along with equal wastage of space on all the 4 sides. This is possible only if we stand at the same distance from our subject for each and every image. So how do we keep this distance constant at all the times? Let's take an example. Let us say we are planning to record an anterior aesthetic close-up image using a full-frame camera. According to higher authorities like American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, anterior aesthetic close-up images are to be made at a magnification ratio of 1 is to 1. So the first thing we need to do is put the 100mm macro lens on manual focus. Watch this video on our YouTube channel and Photography School to know more about lenses. After setting the lens on manual focus, then we set the magnification ratio by rotating the focusing ring. Note that the magnification ratios are the numbers in yellow. Magnification ratio set at 1 is to 1 will look something like this on our lens. Once we set the magnification ratio, we must not touch the focusing ring on the lens again. We then move close to the subject with the camera settings set correctly. When we see through the lens, we realize that the subject is not in focus. This is because we are standing at an arbitrary distance. Now our job is to get our subject in focus, and there are 2 ways of doing it. One by rotating the focusing ring, and 2 by physically moving back and forth. But since we've already used the focusing ring to set our magnification ratio, we cannot use it again to focus on our subject. Because if we rotate the ring, even the magnification ratio will change. So we are left with only one option, that is to move towards and away from the subject. In this case, we have started from pretty close to our subject already. So we decided to move away from the subject, and we realized that the subject is getting sharper. That is a good sign, and we are taking steps in the right direction. Well done. After slowly moving even more away, we get our subject in full focus, and now it looks very sharp. You may also have noted that at 1 is to 1 magnification ratio, you will be at a distance of 1.82 feet, in other words, 0.31 meters. Which also means that only when the camera is at a distance of 1.02 feet, that is 0.31 meter from our subject, we will get relatively sharp images for these kinds of shots. We might also get a beep sound and a focus point light flicker if the shutter release was half pressed while doing this process. That's the camera telling us that our subject is in focus. Now, we can safely say that we used a magnification ratio of 1 is to 1 to make this image. But what if we move more away? The subject will appear blurred again. So in conclusion, we can safely say that only at 1 is to 1 magnification ratio, the distance will be 1.02 feet, and only at that distance our subject will be sharp. If the subject comes for a follow-up after many years, we set the same magnification ratio on the lens, move towards and away from the subject to focus. This is how we respect magnification ratios, and in return we get standardized images. We hope you like this video. The entire video and animation was made on Microsoft PowerPoint and Keynote. To follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp and Telegram, here are the details. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting the link to my YouTube channel as well for all of you all, and you might be able to access all these videos even later on. So hopefully you might have understood what I meant by how you can use your magnification ratios. Basically, magnification ratios do help us at that very safe point where we had taken the pre-operative or the post-operative images, and we set the magnification ratio by using the focusing ring or the focusing barrel. And like I said, we use typically we use 3 types of magnification ratios: 1 is to 15, 1 is to 3, or 1 is to 1.5 for crop sensor camera users. 1 is to 10, 1 is to 2, and 1 is to 1.5 for full frame camera users. All right. Why that is the case is because basically full frame means a larger sensor size and a crop sensor means a smaller sensor size. So if I'm using a crop sensor camera body and a 100 mm macro lens and I'm standing at 1 meter distance from my subject, and if I'm using the same lens on a full frame camera body, I'm going to be seeing two different things. So basically what I'm saying is if the distance is same and the lens is same, but I'm using two different camera bodies. One is a full frame and one is a crop sensor. When I look through the viewfinder, I'll be able to see different things. In the sense, when I look through the full frame camera, I'll be able to see four full teeth. But when I look through a crop sensor camera body, I'll be able to see maybe two and a half teeth, not more than that, because the sensor size by itself is a smaller. Uh, so this is what I want to say, that if I'm standing at a 1 meter distance from, this is just an example, an arbitrary example. It is not a practical example. It's just a theoretical example for us to understand that if I'm standing at 1 foot distance or 1 meter distance from the subject with two different cameras but the same lens, when I look through both the cameras at the same distance when the subject is in focus, I'll be able to see four teeth or something like that in a full frame camera, but two and a half teeth in a crop sensor DSLR. So what do I do if I want to see four teeth in the crop sensor DSLR as well? Simple, just go away couple of feet, a half a feet or a half a meter, and or maybe even 6 inches away from the subject. So basically, if you want to see the same view as that of a full frame DSLR, in the sense if you want to see four teeth instead of two and a half teeth, even in your crop sensor DSLR, instead of standing at 1 meter distance, just go to 1.25 meters and you'll be able to see four teeth. So that does not make any difference at all. So basically what I'm saying is if you're using a full frame DSLR, you might have to stand a little closer as compared to a crop sensor DSLR, wherein you can maintain a good amount of distance from the patient. So whatever is comfortable for you, you can buy that particular camera body according to your choice. And that is all I had to cover in this episode. That's the live 2 of the session for now. So what I'm going to be doing now is quickly ask you if you have any questions, and if you have any questions, I'm going to be answering it right away. Till the time I see a couple of questions on my chat window, I'm going to be making a couple of important announcements now. So this was the first day of my podcast launch, and I was super happy that all of you came and attended. So this is the first day of my podcast. That's the Dental Photography School podcast, which is my second podcast actually. And I'm super happy because this is the world's first podcast dedicated to clinical photography, and it need not be only for dentists. It can be attended by dental students, even your front desk office staff, even your clinical chairside assistants, dental hygienists. It can be attended by dermatologists, ophthalmologists. The basic information remains the same for anyone in who's planning to pursue clinical photography and who's planning to upgrade their skills. All right. So what I'm going to be quickly doing is I'm going to be sharing a link to my podcast. That's the Dental Photography School podcast on the chat window. So I hope you all got it. I put my link to all of you all. So you can just go on that link and go and subscribe to my podcast. That's the Dental Photography School podcast. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Podchaser, Stitcher, or even across all the globally famous podcasting platforms. At the same time, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing another link with all of you because that is the link to my first podcast actually. So the 32-minute podcast is my first podcast in which I discuss everything in dentistry, not only about clinical documentation, but I'm going to be discussing periodontics, prosthodontics, aesthetic dentistry, rubber dermatology, basically everything in dentistry, even practice management. And tomorrow we have an episode launched by one of the most famous speakers who's going to be coming to meet us tomorrow during one of our live events, most probably in the evening session, where that guest is going to be coming and he's going to be disclosing who is the winner of the Choice of Voice contest number 3. So if you have not yet participated in the Choice of Voice contest number 3, just note that the speaker himself is going to be coming over live tomorrow to declare or probably to select who's going to be the winner for the choice of voice contest number 3. So what is the choice of voice contest is you just have to listen to a trailer of the episode, and you try to guess who is the speaker that's going to be featured on our next episode for tomorrow. So the 32-minute podcast is going to be coming ahead with episodes every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Indian Standard Time. And the Dental Photography School podcast is going to be featuring a new episode every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. most probably. So why it is like that is because I'm going to be giving a lot of tips on clinical photography and general photography on Saturdays. So you can use those tips or apply those tips or try those tips out on Sunday, and then you can start practicing it from Monday in your clinical practice. Right. And on Sunday, I'll be having my 32-minute podcast episode launch. So if you want to keep a track of, if you want to participate in the choice of voice contest, I'm going to be putting a link on the chat window right now where you can participate in the choice of voice contest number 3. It is a very famous speaker who's going to be coming in our episode live tomorrow, most probably in the evening, to declare and select who is going to be the winner of the choice of voice contest number 3. So you can also go ahead and subscribe to my podcast, that is the Dental Photography School podcast and the 32-minute podcast. If you want to stay updated about all our future events, I would highly recommend that you download the Telegram app and you join our Telegram group. So I'm going to be putting a link for that as well on our chat window. And if you want to know anything about dental photography and documentation, there is a super website for it. It's not only for dentists. The information out there on my website is fairly applicable for any clinical photography fields. And I have conducted a lot of workshops for dermatologists also. So do check out this particular website, that is dentalphotographyschool.in, because it has loads of information. All right, so I'm going to be taking questions now if you have any. So I'll wait for a minute or two if there are any questions. If there are no questions whatsoever, I am going to call it day. So do let me know if you have any questions at all. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Renu Ram Rakhyani. Can a macro lens be used for mobile phones? Um, so I think what you're trying to ask, if do we have macro lenses for mobile phones? Is that your questions, Renu? So the answer to that is yes. But let me tell you one particular thing, and that's going to be very helpful for all of us. See, whenever you put a glass element on another glass element, you are going to reduce the quality of your pictures. So basically, when I put a lens on my camera body, I'm putting the camera body as by itself does not have any glass elements. So the only glass elements that goes onto the camera body is my lens. All right. So it's not like I'm adding a glass element on a glass element. But when what you are talking about, Reno, is you're talking about attaching macro lens that's available separately on the lens of your mobile phone. So that is called glass on glass attachment, which is not a great thing to do because it is definitely going to affect your image quality. So yes, there are macro lenses, but I would not suggest that you use it because just imagine your macro. So the inbuilt lens of your camera is a wide angle lens, and then suddenly you're putting a macro lens. So you're actually playing a lot with the light directions, and that's definitely going to affect your image quality. But if you ask me yes or no, so the answer is yes, there are macro lenses, but I do not recommend them whatsoever. So we have a friend, Dr. Noel Perkins, who goes by the Instagram handle Artistic Dental on Instagram. He makes awesome pictures on clinical photography and dental photography, and a lot of ground sections and glamour dental photography. Do check out his stuff on Instagram. It's by the name of artistic.dental, if I'm not wrong, Noel. So Noel is a dentist practicing in UK, and if you haven't seen his Instagram, I would suggest that you do go ahead and check that out. So we have a question from Ankur Vaidya, who's asking me, for macro photography, is aperture f3.5 better than 2.8, especially outdoor photography without flash? So the answer to that is it does not really matter, very honestly. In fact, for outdoor photography, if you do not want to use flash, I would probably want to use a smaller f number lens. In the sense, so let me give you a secret that I have never shared with anyone. The lens works best if you use it not at the extreme values. In the sense, um, my lens is going to give me, if I use a 100 mm macro lens by Canon on a Canon camera, so the minimum f value is 2.8 and the maximum is 32. These are two values where I would probably never want to use my lens on. So I would never want to use my lens on 2.8 or f32. Okay, so I would probably go to in the small end category or the small f number range. I would go to f2.8 to f3.5, f4.0, and then use the lens. Because when you use the lens at the extreme values, it does give you a lot of aberrations, which are quite minimal actually for general people like us. It does not really matter because we are not critics of photography. We are just general users. So it does not really matter to general users. In fact, the pictures of flowers that you saw on my presentation were all shot at 2.8, but that's not a great f number to be kept at. So I would probably use my lens at f4 for general photography without flash. So that's an advantage that I get because my f number is less, so more light enters and my image is going to be great. But if you're using a 3.5 f number, that's a disadvantage actually speaking, because you cannot use your lens at f3.5 because it might give you an aberration. Strictly speaking, as such, it does not really matter. Let me repeat that. So probably I would want to go from f3.5 to f4 to f5.6. So when I go to f5.6, the lens is consuming a lot of light, and I might want to go to higher ISO to compensate for that. So it's not a great thing to have a lens which is f3.5. In fact, having lens which is f2.5 is a great advantage for outdoor photography right there. I hope that answers your question. If it did not, I would probably try to explain it once again. But the answer to your question is f2.8 is better than f3.5 even for outdoor photography, and it really matters a lot. But in clinical photography or dental photography, it's of no value because any which ways we do not use a lens on lower f numbers. We use a lens on high f numbers always. So if you're using an 85 mm macro lens, that's by Nikon, the minimum f number is 3.5. The maximum, I think it goes to even f40, and I think the 105 mm Nikon I have seen going to f50 as well, which is quite great and impressive. But the only problem is these are very heavy lenses and very pricey too. All right, so I do not know if there are any more questions, but I don't think we have any more questions. All right, so if you want to know more about clinical photography or even general photography, you can head on to my website, that is dentalphotographyschool.in, which has a lot of information. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. And before I leave, I just want to show you what's in store for us tomorrow. So if you have not really registered for the Dental Photography School podcast launch event, which is today and tomorrow, today's over. I would suggest that you go ahead and register immediately right away, because there are a lot of privileges of getting registered for this particular event. In the sense, you get to attend all the live sessions. That's common for all, but you get a longer access to this videos. So I'm going to be stopping access to people who haven't subscribed to my um, podcasts. That's both the podcasts. You get longer access, or maybe I've said that a lifetime access actually. So you get a lifetime access to all the event recordings throughout. So do register for this event, and the process of registration is right there on my website. That's www.dentalphotographyschool.in. Apart from lifetime access, you also get access to Glamour Dental Photography tutorials, which is an 8.5 hour long tutorial. And you get a discount on Magic Box, that's the intraoral accessory kit, which has all the intraoral accessories that you need for intraoral photography. If you want to buy the full box, you get an discount of 1000 rupees. That's huge. And if you want to buy individual accessories, you get a discount on that as well. But this discount is available only for people who have registered for the podcast launch event. So what do we do to get registered for the podcast launch event is, number one, step one, you just subscribe to both my podcasts. That's Dental Photography School and 32 Minute. Give subscribe and give it a review and a rating. Take screenshots and you upload it on the Google form over here. So who all can subscribe and give a rating? Both iPhone as well as Android users, as well as Windows or Mac users can subscribe and give a rating. So this is a form where you will be getting to upload all your pictures, and you're going to be registered with us. Talking about tomorrow, we have a super session coming in tomorrow morning at 11:30 in the morning in Indian time. It's going to be on my editing workflow in clinical photography. So do not miss that, because I'm going to be talking about how to simplify the process of sorting your pictures, how to access your pictures, and how to make the entire protocol or the workflow really nice and simple for all of us. So that's on November 15th. That's tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. All right. So if you want to register for the podcast launch event, head on to my website. That's dentalphotographyschool.in. I'm going to be looking forward to see you tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. All right. So thank you so much for joining me once again today. I'll be looking forward to see you tomorrow. How was today's session, by the way, guys? How did you find today's session? Was it awesome? It was good. How did you find today's session? And do you have any more questions further ahead? It was great. So thank you so much, Nalini Kumar. It was really, really great to have your company for today. I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow. Thank you so much, Noel, for coming in. And happy Diwali to all of you. I'm sure there was a lot of disturbance because of the crackers bursting outside my house, but it's Diwali and I can't do anything about it. It's one of the most auspicious times in India. And happy Diwali to all of you. Have a prosperous new year. In fact, tomorrow is my new year. I'm a Gujarati, so Sal Mubarak to all of you all. Happy Diwali and a happy new year to everyone. I'll be seeing you tomorrow at 11:30 in the morning. Thanks for joining in today, and goodbye. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.